and I'm here to try and keep you awake for the last presentation of the day prior to you getting to interrogate the statisticians. Please make sure you really take advantage of that fact in the next session. So, what I'm here to talk to you about today is how the pharmaceutical industry is changing and how you guys can be part of this. So what I wanted to get across to start with is what's changed since I've been in the pharmaceutical industry. So for example, this top left picture is actually what my phone looked like when I joined the industry. And this one beneath it is now what my phone is like, my work phone, and I can get my email anywhere in the world. I can log on to study information, absolutely everything is at my fingertips. Things like Twitter and Facebook, we're so adept with them, they seem like they've been part of our lives forever, but these actually only came out in 2005, 2006. So when I started work, these weren't a part of the culture, but they obviously are now, and they are used for recruiting patients for trials. So things have really, really changed in just this short amount of time. So in terms of the pharmaceutical industry, does it need to change? Now my lovely student Kylie has put this plot together for us, which shows across the last 20-odd years how much the pharmaceutical industry is spending on research and development. So you can see from the 1980s, right the way up to 2003, we're now spending about 50 billion a year on pharmaceuticals. What's really interesting is then when you can compare how many new drugs have got to market. So this green line here shows you how many new drugs each year have gone to market. So you can see, apart from a really good year in around 1996, we haven't really changed. And to put this into perspective, I just wanted to give you an idea of how many people are contributing to this. So we've got Steve, how many people work for GSK?
I don't know the exact number, but it's around probably 100,000 sort of mark globally.
We've got Kate and Jen. Yeah, how many got?
About 17,000.
Okay, Verimed, how many got there?
20.
Excellent, fine. Every little one makes a difference. So again, we've done some quick calculations. The companies represented here in this room, there are 377,000 employees. And that's only the companies that are represented in this room. And between them, the year before last, they only managed to get about 23 drugs to market. So the question, does the pharmaceutical industry need to change? I think it's a pretty obvious answer of a very definite yes. Something needs to give, it can't continue like this. So how are we going to change it? I don't know if you guys are old enough to remember a program called Family Fortunes. See a few nods? Okay. So this is pharmaceutical fortunes. So rather than just give you my view of what's going to change, what I did was, I went round and I asked 30 people in the pharmaceutical industry the following questions. What do you see as emerging trends that have a big impact in the next 5 years? And what's our largest challenge facing the pharma industry in these 5 years? So in terms of the upcoming trends, so the biggest one, now I've done this over a few years and this has changed. This 3 years ago didn't make the radar, but this year it's one of the top ones, public access to clinical data. So any drug that is now submitted within Europe, anybody can ask for that data that's been submitted, and that's the individual patient level data. This might not sound a huge issue, but you can imagine pharmaceutical companies, they're very competitive. This is actually quite almost what we've set up to avoid, and now we have to set up to then actually be this transparent, and it's going to really change the way people think about the pharma industry. So years ago, we had these beautiful things that made the pharmaceutical industry lots and lots of money called blockbusters. So think of things like insulin for diabetes, or many, many years ago, penicillin. So drugs that hit everything. So penicillin, for example, that's probably, how many people in this room are taking penicillin? Yeah, so most of them. So if you think of the person that invented penicillin, they're gonna make a lot of money. These days, a lot more medicine is personalised or tailored, and therefore you're making a much smaller market, so you need to spend a lot less money getting that drug to market. There's a lot more outsourcing, a lot more use of external partners and databases. When I started in the industry, it was very much that the farmers kept the work that they wanted, and the CROs got what was left. But now farmers cannot cope, well it's not they can't cope, they are trying to develop so much more and so much quicker. In order to do this, they have to find a faster model to do that. And one way to do that is to utilise CROs, like the Verimed and Quintiles and Quanticate we've got here. And instead of just giving them the bits that are kind of the straightforward bit, they're now getting whole studies. So your experience within a CRO or a farmer is a lot more similar than it would have been 10 years ago when I joined the industry. Something else that's a massive change, that's just trend, is actually completely the areas we're working in. The big three now tend to be the diabetes, oncology, and the Alzheimer's. So, for example, the diabetes population in 1996 was 1.4 million in the UK. Today it's 2.6 million, and 90% of these are type 2 diabetics. So that's a huge, huge market that's really changed over the last 10, 15 years. And the pharma industry needs to change to adapt to keep up with people's needs. So there's a difference in the kind of sales and the emerging markets. So traditionally, you think of drug development as being very much Europe-based or US-based. And now we're going into very different markets. So there's still huge populations in Brazil and China and Russia. And they want sort of more individualized clinical trials. So as you can imagine, the Asian population, they have very different genetics to us, to Caucasians, very different metabolisms, obviously in a lot of cases different BMIs, and they actually don't want to take drugs anymore that have only been tested on your Caucasian Americans. So now when you bring a drug to market, it's very important that you're testing across all the populations, otherwise you're going to be asked to go back and redo those studies in order to get them out to the Chinese and Brazilian markets. So it's something about thinking ahead there. Other things that came up is it used to be, to a certain extent, that whether or not you took a drug forward, you'd make it based on your p-value, and it would be kind of clinician's decision to a certain extent. But now we're looking more at the quantitative program level. So, for example, if you've got 3 or 4 drugs for Alzheimer's, which one are you going to take forward? And rather than just sort of that being done on a clinician's drug, their gut feeling almost, you would make a statistical-based analysis based on preclinical data, and you'd weigh up these drugs against each other, and then you could move forward. So it's a lot more quantitative. Statisticians aren't just getting involved anymore in designing trials and analysing. You've got to look across the whole portfolio and work out what's the best to put forward. We call it probability of technical success, and what you want to do is go in with the drug that has the best success, and that's something that statisticians are a huge part of now. Another thing is the in-licensing of drugs. So it used to be that pharmaceutical companies would come up with the molecules, then they'd develop them, and then they'd put them in the market. Now what's happening is a lot of academia or other small labs will be coming up with the actual initial drugs, but they then don't obviously have the funding to do large phase 3 studies, so they'll be selling them on to pharma companies. So you're often getting a drug in-house that you know nothing about, and then that's a really important thing for a statistician to get involved in, to see whether their data, which perhaps might not have been done in the analysis in the way that you'd have done it, whether or not this drug that they're saying works actually does work based on the data. You can't redo their clinical trial, so you have to look and see what you can get from that information. So one of our big challenges, a third of our people said that we've got to now use innovation to find drugs more efficiently. It takes around 13 years, you've probably heard other people talk about it today, to take a drug to market. It's too long. People aren't willing to wait that long anymore. I'm working on projects now where we're hoping to get a drug from the first time in the clinic to market in 6 years, which still sounds like a really long time, but we're more than half of the time that it's going to take it to get development. And that is a real change from the statistician point of view, because you've got to do shorter trials, you've got to use your data more effectively, and you've just really got to get there a hell of a lot quicker. Something that's changed a lot in the recent years is this power shift towards payers and patients. So by payers, I mean, so you might get a drug and it might get approved by the FDA or in the UK by the MHRA, and that's great, your drug works, these regulatory authorities have said it's safe to give to patients, but unless the government are willing to buy that drug and put it on the NHS, and in our case this government is called the NICE organisation, unless they're willing to fund it, then it's still not going to go to patients. And so they have quite a lot of power that says whether or not your drug is actually going to go out to the market at all. And if they say no, then even though you've got a working drug, it's still not going to make you any money, and you're not going to be able to put that money back into research and development. So it's about liaising with these guys earlier to whether or not they think it's something that's feasible. I think a good example of this is, I don't know if you read in the paper recently, with the meningitis B vaccine. It was all approved and everything, and then it was decided by the NICE organisation it was too expensive to fund to immunise the babies. There was a large campaign against it, and the decision was actually reversed. But that's what can happen. You can come up with a vaccine that actually cures meningitis B, and it doesn't mean it's going to go to market. So you've got to make these liaisons in advance. As I said before, we've got the population that are aging, combined with the debt crisis. So we've got an aging population, and once you retire, you don't pay so many taxes. So who's going to pay for that medication to actually help those Alzheimer's patients and people developing diabetes in their 60s and 70s? So that's a real cost issue coming up in the future. Drug development, as you saw from our plot, is just costing more and more. And I think from this you're going to expect some mergers between companies. So it's already happened. There's been many recently, but yeah, that's certainly moving forward. What I'm noticing is there's not necessarily formal mergers, but companies are actually getting together. Lilly are working with AstraZeneca at the moment to develop a new drug for Alzheimer's, because that way they can share the risk, they can share the cost, and ultimately if it works, they'll share the profits. But that is better than not having the money to develop it in the first place. As I said, the speed definitely needs to increase. This 13 years isn't really good enough. You get about 20 years on a patent life from when you discover a molecule in the labs. And if you take 13 years to then get that to the market, you've only actually got 7 years to recoup your cost before anyone else can make this drug on your behalf. So without that window increasing, people are not able to recoup their costs to put their money back in research and development. A lot of this can be done through improvements in statistical designs. You've heard about phase 1, 2, and 3 today. What's happening a lot more is you get adaptive clinical designs. So for example, you might merge phase 2 and phase 3 together. So if your drug is looking like it's going to do well during phase 2, you then might extend it to a wider population or more dose arms. And those sort of things that we can do statistically can make our trials run quicker and more effectively. And as I said on the last slide, a massive challenge from the pharmaceutical industry point of view is the transparency in practice. So the pharmaceutical industry has always been held to a high standard by the regulatory authorities, but now we are held to an even higher standard from the patients as well. And that's always going to be interesting, because if anyone can get that data, then anyone can do their own analysis on it. So it can have quite potential negative impacts. You've got to be very careful what you collect and how it's transparent about it. So it's a really good thing. I think it's what's going to change the reputation of the pharmaceutical industry, but it's something we have to take into account. And lots of companies have their own transparency group now around that. And in general, there's just higher regulatory hurdles than when I joined the industry. They're asking for more, basically. There's been too many drugs recently that have gone on the market and had to be taken off for safety concerns. So it's not good enough to be quick and get to market and not know that you're safe in your population. You have to know that you're safe before you go. And as I said before, we're losing lots of these patents. About 20 years, you've got to make your money. So many things. We had the golden age of sort of the 1970s and 80s, where lots of, in particular Lilly, we had lots of psychiatry drugs that came out for schizophrenia, and now those are coming off patent. There's not all the funding that's coming in from those. So that's a tricky thing that many companies are facing at the moment. So that all sounds like it's a tough industry to join, but what I'm trying to get across is how much things are changing and what you guys need to bring to this industry. And one of the things that we're trying to get across is that pharma and CROs are a lot more similar than years ago, so please look at all companies, what they could offer you and what you can offer them. But it is extremely fast-paced, I suspect, today, in the fact that I've just been here for the day. My clinical plans for one of my compounds have probably completely changed in the space of 24 hours. It may sound like 13 years is a long time, but it's extremely fast-paced within that time, particularly if you're trying to do it in 6 years like we are. And we really do need new blood, new ideas, different ways of thinking, because we saw that from the beginning, we cannot continue like this. We have to get things to market, they have to be safer, and they have to be better. And that's why we need these fresh blood, basically. So I just ask you to, if you are going to join the pharmaceutical industry, to be ready to work, show your ideas. No idea is too crazy. It's always worth looking at, and yeah, I hope it's something that challenge appeals to you. Thank you very much.